We live in interesting times.
For the headlines.
Hurricane Dorian lashed the Carolinas with driving rain and fierce winds as it neared the U.S. East Coast after devastating the Bahamas and killing at least 20 people.
In the hurricane-battered Bahamas, seeing is believing when it comes to knowing loved ones are safe.
Hong Kong's leader urges pro-democracy protesters to end their demonstration after her surprise decision to bow to one of their key demands is condemned as too little, too late.
And Britain is gearing up for an early election after Parliament dealt a series of stinging defeats to Prime Minister Boris Johnson's hardline Brexit stance. I'm Alma Angeles, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thank you very much for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening, everyone. I'm Sam Cepeda.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Don Orozco.
Now to the news. Hurricane Dorian has claimed at least 20 lives, according to Bahamas Prime Minister Hubert Minnis, warning the storm had caused generational devastation as it moved towards the U.S. East Coast. Minnis confirmed the storm's death toll has risen to at least 20 during a news conference in which he described the unthinkable damage that parts of his island nation had sustained. The U.S. Coast Guard and Britain's Royal Navy airlifted survivors and ferried in emergency supplies as floodwaters receded in the Bahamas, while the center of the strengthening storm continued towards South Carolina. The Miami-based National Hurricane Center said Dorian, which has already wrought major damage on its course through the Atlantic, was packing maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, making it a Category 3 storm on the 5-level Saffir-Simpson scale. The United Nations said hundreds of thousands of people on Grand Bahama and Abaco Islands were in immediate need of aid.
The initial assessments that we are getting in is that it's rather catastrophic. As we heard, it made landfall in the Abaco Islands. The population there is a little more than 17,000 people. We're concerned for all of them. It is now with the Grand Bahama, the population there is about 51,000 people. We are concerned for every one of them. The Prime Minister of Bahamas have said already that 5 individuals have been confirmed killed as a result of this hurricane.
It was the strongest hurricane on record to make landfall in the Bahamas. At its peak, it had maximum sustained winds of 270 kilometers an hour, which is absolutely huge, with gusts of up to 321 kilometers an hour.
We believe that more than 13,000 houses have been severely damaged or destroyed. That's about 45% of all homes on the 2 islands.
It's life-threatening, it's devastating, it's now weakened to the equivalent of a Category 3 hurricane. The winds are still devastating, the storm surge is still life-threatening, and the rainfall is still torrential.
Abaco may require food for more than 14,000 people, and Grand Bahama for 47,000 people.
This is the 4th consecutive year that we have witnessed an extremely devastating Atlantic hurricane season, including Category 5 hurricanes like Dorian. The sequence cannot be divorced from the fact that these last 5 years have been the hottest ever recorded because of the continuing rise in greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Hurricane Dorian crystallizes the existential threat posed to small island developing states by the ongoing climate emergency. This is an enormous humanitarian and development challenge for the Bahamas. Within the past few years, the Bahamas has been seriously affected by at least 3 major hurricanes. All Category 4 storms are above. The impact of Hurricanes Joaquin, Matthew and Irma on the Bahamas has been reported to cost approximately $820 million.
In terms of needs, we believe that Abaco Island has the most vulnerable population. There's a large Haitian community on the island who will need, we believe, a significant amount of assistance to recover from and rebuild after this storm. We also understand that about 62,000 people across the two islands will need access to clean drinking water.
A mother reunites with her son and her mother who were affected by Hurricane Dorian upon their arrival in Nassau. We can also see other Bahamians affected by the hurricane describe the damages caused by Dorian. Take a look.
Everybody from 1 to 90 say that as long as they've been on this earth, they have never seen anything like that. You can't imagine what we're doing. We need plenty of help because, trust me, from my observation, I'm not a technical person, but it's going to take a long time before we see that the power restored. The entire infrastructure has been compromised, and including the power station. The police station is gone.
We were in our house and everything was fine at first, but then we could hear the ceiling crinkle and everything, and then the ceiling started to collapse, but it was too rough to go outside at that time, so we had to pull out all the stuff out of the cupboards, go in the cupboards for a little bit, and then when the eye of the storm came, we had to run. It really is, nothing's there anymore. There's no food stores, there's no marinas, there's no houses. 80% of the houses gone. And I hope that they could build it back, but I don't see it in the next couple of months. I see it in the next couple of years.
The United Nations said 70,000 people on Grand Bahama and Abaco Island, virtually the entire population, were in immediate need of aid, while the government confirmed the grim new victim count, which was expected to rise further. U.S. Coast Guard and Royal Navy helicopters were conducting medical evacuations, aerial assessments to help coordinate relief efforts, and reconnaissance flights to assess damage. U.S. President Donald Trump spoke by phone to the Bahamian leader and pledged U.S. assistance, the White House said. Bahamian Prime Minister Hubert Minnis called Dorian one of the greatest national crises in our country's history, lamenting the severe flooding and widespread damage to the country's infrastructure. He said additional police were being sent to Abaco to prevent possible looting. Aerial footage showed scenes of catastrophic damage in Abaco, with hundreds of homes missing roofs, cars submerged or overturned, widespread flooding, and boats reduced to matchwood. The international airport in Freeport, the largest city on Grand Bahama Island, was severely damaged and its runways unusable, complicating relief efforts.
In the hurricane-battered Bahamas, seeing is believing when it comes to knowing loved ones are safe.
Is the part of Abaco that hasn't been accounted for since Sunday. So these will be the first set of people from northern Abaco that are finally getting flown out. So these are our family members. There are still countless people in other settlements that we haven't heard from, that do not have cell phone service, that do not have satellite phone access. So we still have tons of people that we need to get aid to, that we need to get accounted for, family members that we don't know how they are doing.
The 25-year-old is prepared to wait all day at the Nassau airport to welcome her mother or her aunt, evacuated from Grand Abaco, one of the worst-hit islands in the Bahamas during Hurricane Dorian. In the private section of the international airport, rounds of helicopters heading north towards the devastated areas have been flying since Wednesday morning. In front of a hangar, ambulances wait to transport wounded survivors who arrive at the snail's pace to local hospitals. Turnquest and her two cousins eagerly search the arriving faces for a familiar one. The three students only recently moved to Nassau, the archipelago's capital, and have had almost no news of their friends and family in Treasure Cay since the Category 5 storm bore down on the islands Sunday.
Our parents live in Abaco because that is where they reside. We grew up there. At this time, we lost everything as far as we're concerned. No homes are standing. All of the jobs that was available, everything is gone. So that's where we're at right now. And we're just here because we know that people are being brought in from Treasure Cay, Abaco. They're being evacuated. That's all we know at this time. So we're here hoping that we can see them to know that they're okay.
Anxiety, nervous, excitement that people are finally getting out of there. It seemed like the government wasn't doing anything to help anyone out of North Abaco. And the roads are flooded, so no one can get to and from Treasure Cay. The services are down.
The year's most powerful storm has already devastated one country, and it's not over yet. For days, Hurricane Dorian slowly tore through the Bahamas, and we are getting a look at that destruction now. Thursday will likely bring more grim news as people get a better look at what the storm left behind after spinning over Grand Bahama and Abaco Islands for nearly 2 days with flooding rains and storm surge, as well as winds of up to 195 kilometers per hour. At least 20 people were killed, infrastructure in shreds, communities gutted, and the Prime Minister says his country is facing a national crisis. Entire villages are gone, and beaches usually packed with tourists are instead covered with parts of buildings, destroyed cars, and the remains of people's lives.
We are in the midst of one of the greatest national crises in our country's history. The government will bring to bear every resource of state possible to help the people of Abaco and Grand Bahama or any other island nation that's necessary.
Everybody from 1 to 90 say that as long as they've been on this earth, they have never seen anything like that. You can't imagine what was done.
Nothing's there anymore. There's no food stores, there's no marinas, there's no houses. 80% of the houses gone.
Yeah.
And I hope that they could build it back, but I don't see it in the next couple of months. I see it in the next couple of years.
Forecasters expecting the center of the storm to move near or over the coast of South Carolina on Thursday and the coast of North Carolina on Friday before accelerating off to the northeast as Dorian weakens.
Meanwhile, a stronger and a little larger Hurricane Dorian has now exited Florida, and it's now headed to the coast of Georgia and slamming the Carolinas. Hurricane Dorian lashed the Carolinas with driving rain and fierce winds as it neared the U.S. East Coast on Thursday after devastating the Bahamas, killing at least 20 people. Parts of downtown Charleston were flooded with video footage earlier showing people kayaking in the dark and gushing knee-deep water in the stately city on the coast of South Carolina. Trees bent in wind gusting in from the sea. Dozens of streets were reported closed as up to 20 inches of rain were forecast, and forecasters warned of flash flooding. As day broke, the Category 3 hurricane was 80 miles southeast of Charleston, moving north along the coast with maximum sustained winds of 115 miles per hour, according to the National Hurricane Center. Hundreds of thousands of people in the Carolinas, Georgia, and elsewhere were under evacuation orders as the U.S. geared for its taste of a storm that caused severe destruction in the Bahamas. Power has been knocked out to more than 80,000 customers in South Carolina, and at least 22 shelters have been set up for the evacuees, according to the State Emergency Management Agency on Twitter. National Hurricane Center Director Ken Graham provided a look as they track the storm. Take a look.
Welcome back to the National Hurricane Center. This is Ken Graham. Right now, operations area, continuing to watch Hurricane Dorian. Dennis, we're going to start off with the radar here. Look at all this rainfall, just moving over the same areas over and over, and that's becoming a problem with time as that rain starts to accumulate. Also, some gusty winds inside this as well. The latest vitals, 150 miles south of Charleston, South Carolina, 110 mile an hour winds. North-northwest, 8 miles an hour is the latest movement. So still fairly slow, and that just gives some time for more of these impacts. Let's look at the latest forecast that we have updated. You know, we've been covering this for a while, just the extent of the tropical storm force winds here, extending about 175 miles from the center. So that's going to be a problem because you're going to have the winds, you're going to have the rain, and that always causes to have the trees down and have power outages as well. So watching that with time. So when you look at the hurricane force winds stretching out from the center, that's where we're looking at, well, the hurricane warnings, because when that movement is close to the coast, which we have with time close to the South Carolina coast, the North Carolina coast, the Outer Banks, and then back out into the Atlantic. Look how close we are to the coastline. So we could see hurricane force winds in any one of these areas, and that's where we have the hurricane warning. Tropical storm warning on either end of it. It's a little further off the coast, all the way up to even Virginia could see some of those winds. So one of the most dangerous aspects of the hurricane is, well, it's the storm surge. We always talk about it. Half the fatalities come from the storm surge, and that's going to be a big problem. People really need to take this serious. Know your evacuation zone. You have to listen to the local officials. The emergency managers do an amazing job out there, really looking at the danger zones, and if you're in one of those zones and they tell you to get out, definitely get out. So let's look at some of these values. Throughout Georgia, we could get 3 to 5 foot of storm surge in some areas, and you work your way up the coastline to South Carolina. Look at around Savannah and Charleston. Any one of these areas, 4 to 7 feet right around the Savannah area. But even higher, you start to get further up the coast in South Carolina, 5 to 8 feet, just that prolonged onshore flow, pushing water not only just on the barrier islands, but moving inland as well in some of your estuaries and also some of your sounds. Up the coast, Dennis, we go up to North Carolina. Look at 4 to 7 feet in some areas. And a point that I really want to make in this entire storm surge warning area is the fact that it's not just on the barrier islands. Look at some of the values as we get, there's your barrier islands, but look how far that storm surge extends inland, the Pamlico Sound, New Bern, places like that could see some storm surge values because just the water filters in over the barrier islands and continues to go in, and where those channels start to narrow, that water really starts to pile up. And we've also added around Norfolk, Virginia Beach, because 2 to 4 foot could occur up there. That exceeds our threshold for a storm surge warning. So really watching some of these dangers and the rainfall. We always talk about the rainfall being a danger as well, and the Weather Prediction Center just doing an amazing job. They've got portions over the next 3 days highlighted into a moderate and a high risk, mainly portions that could see that 6 to 10 inches of rain, 10 to 15 right along the coast. But remember, normal jogs in that track, little wobbles, can push some of those high values even further inland. So everybody has to really be aware of the dangers of the rainfall and the storm surge. 6 to 10 inches is just, it could cause some flash flooding, flooding of the roadways. And especially if you get into 10 to 15 and even isolated higher than that, anywhere from the coast to Outer Banks, North Carolina. Let's draw it again because it's important. North Carolina, South Carolina, and even the Georgia coast.
A 6-year-old boy was among 4 people killed after severe flooding hit India's financial hub Mumbai, resulting in dozens of cancelled or delayed flights, officials said Thursday. Mumbai, home to 20 million people, has been hit by torrential downpours over the past 2 months amid the annual monsoon deluge. Non-stop rain over several hours on Wednesday paralyzed traffic, halted trains, and delayed airport operations at the western city. Mumbai police official Shashikant Augade said the child fell into a drain during the deluge on Wednesday. His parents searched for him through the night, but his body was only found by police early Thursday. 2 municipal officers died after falling in rainwater, and another man drowned in a river on Wednesday. Residents spoke of being trapped in traffic for several hours amid chaotic scenes. Maharashtra State Government Minister Ashish Shelar said schools would be closed on Thursday as a precautionary measure. More news will be coming your way when Eagle News International returns. Stay tuned.
When visiting the Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Hong Kong residents react after Chief Executive Carrie Lam announced the withdrawal of a controversial extradition bill following the 3 months of protest. Millions of people have taken to Hong Kong's streets since June in the biggest challenge to China's rule of semi-autonomous Hong Kong since its handover from the British in 1997.
個修例嚟得太遲啦！香港人200萬有多嘅人上街，一直去爭取。而家我諗3個月都嚟啦。我哋得到只不過而家係話撤回修例，仲係用個監警會。我相信200萬有良知嘅市民係絕對唔會接。
經過咁多警察暴力啦、濫權啦，咁其實我哋唔認為，即係原先嘅原意就應該係我哋反對修例係因為我哋唔信任中國嘅司法系統。但喺咁多日以嚟咧，我哋見到中國司法系統嘅標準咧已經漸漸咁樣 實行咗喺香港呢個社會上邊。
已經唔係講緊係示威者造成嘅問題，即係我覺得我哋啲市民做嘅示威，反而好多人會覺得安心。我接觸好多街坊，佢哋都覺得示威其實冇乜影響，即係可能有少少不便，但係反而係警察一執行佢哋嘅職務嘅時候個過分武力，甚至係佢哋嘅對象未必淨係示威者嘅時候，令好多即係行路過嘅路途人都會受影響，佢哋覺得好關注咯，其實真係。
In an update, Hong Kong's leader on Thursday urged pro-democracy protesters to end their demonstrations after her surprise decision to bow to one of their key demands was condemned as too little too late. Carrie Lam, the city's pro-Beijing chief executive, surprised many on Wednesday when after 3 months of rallies, she suddenly announced she was scrapping a hugely unpopular proposed extradition law. Let's listen in.
But since my announcement of a dialogue with society last month, about 2 weeks ago, we have been meeting a lot of people from different backgrounds with different political positions. And they gave me this piece of advice, which I now felt that was a very pertinent piece of advice, is that if the government wanted to start a dialogue, the government should also take the initiative to provide a basis for the dialogue. And the withdrawal of the bill to fully allay public concerns is one of those important bases for a dialogue. So I'm sharing with you the sort of developments over the last 2 months on how I have come to that decision.
She renewed her appeal for protesters to enter into a dialogue with her administration and called on moderate protesters to abandon their more militant allies who have frequently clashed with riot police over the last 14 weeks.
And this formal withdrawal of the bill, although it doesn't make a difference in substance because there has been no plan whatsoever since my earlier announcement to resume the bill. So despite being no difference in substance, this is going to be a useful measure for creating that basis for a dialogue. After more than 2 months of social unrest, it is obvious to many of us that the discontentment in society extends far beyond the bill.
The chief executive also pledged her support to the Independent Police Complaints Council, set up to investigate police actions during the protests, which was one of the primary alleged grievances motivating activists.
We will fully support the work of the Independent Police Complaints Council. I noticed that IPCC has announced yesterday details of the members of a panel of international experts, which will help in the assessment and the recommendations in the fact-finding study. These international experts are really renowned experts in their respective fields, and they come from the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. I pledge that the government will seriously follow up recommendations made in the IPCC's report.
The timing of Lam's bill withdrawal was a surprise, but it came after leaked audio recordings emerged of her suggesting her options were limited because Beijing viewed the protests as a direct threat to China's sovereignty and national security. China has increasingly portrayed the protests as a foreign-backed color revolution and described radical protesters or demonstrators as terrorists and separatists. Speaking on Thursday, Mrs. Lam also insisted her decision to withdraw the bill was hers alone and that she received no direction from the mainland China, although she said Beijing supported the move.
The decision is one of the Hong Kong SAR government. In the same way that the bill was introduced, the bill was initiated, introduced, and taken forward by the Hong Kong SAR government. But I'm sure you want to ask about the position of the Central People's Government, so may I just also supplement that throughout the whole process, the Central People's Government took the position that they understood why we have to do it. They respected my view, and they supported me all the way. So whether whether it is in the earlier stages of processing the bill.
Going now to Britain, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson called for an early election to be held on October 15 and reiterated his commitment to leave the European Union on October 31 during a speech in Parliament on Wednesday, despite the House of Commons approving a bill blocking a no-deal Brexit. The House approved a bill which would force Johnson to seek an extension of Brexit beyond the October deadline, to which the PM said, "I refuse to do this." The bill still needs to pass through the House of Lords before it becomes law. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn accused the Conservatives of attempting to filibuster the bill in the House of Lords, which could delay it until after the election.
I will go to Brussels and I will try to get a deal, and believe me, I know that I can get a deal. But if they, Mr. Speaker, if they won't do a deal, I think it would be eminently sensible for them to do so, and as I say, I believe that they will. Then, under any circumstances, this country will leave the EU on October the 31st. Mr. Speaker, it is completely impossible for government to function if the House of Commons refuses to pass anything that the government proposes. And in my view, and the view of this government, there must now be an election on Tuesday the 15th of October, and I invite the right honourable gentleman to respond, to decide which of us goes as Prime Minister to that crucial council on Thursday the 17th of October. But if I'm still Prime Minister after Tuesday the 15th of October, then we will leave on the 31st of October with, I hope, a much better deal.
Mr. Speaker, we want an election because we look forward to turfing this government out. The offer of the election today is a bit like the offer of an apple to Snow White and the Wicked Queen, because what he's offering is not an apple or even an election, but the poison of a no deal. So, Mr. Speaker, I repeat what I said last night. Let this bill pass and gain royal assent, then we will back an election so we do not crash out with a no-deal exit from the European Union. And so it's the anti-democratic instincts of this government that cause us concern. Despite the expressed will of the House to support the bill debated today, the Conservative peers, their colleagues in the Lords, have tabled 92 amendments for debate. I really doubt this is motivated by a desire to improve the legislation, not a bit of it, but to filibuster it. An undemocratic cabal in Downing Street, aligned with an undemocratic and unelected House to override the democratic will of this House expressed in the bill that we have just given a third reading to. If they can't win the argument, they try to shut down debate.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson called Thursday for an early election after a series of votes in Parliament tore up his hardline Brexit stance and left him without a majority. Johnson will argue the Labour leader is denying people their say on the progress of Brexit. Parliament is rushing through legislation designed to keep Johnson from breaking Britain off from its closest trading partners without a negotiated agreement with Brussels. They appeared on course to do so by Monday, a victory that would be accomplished just ahead of 5-week shutdown of Parliament. Johnson controversially ordered at the end of last month. The bill forces Johnson to seek a 3-month Brexit extension until January 31 should no deal emerge from an EU summit in Brussels on October 17 to 18.
Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters clashed with police in Nigeria's capital Abuja on Wednesday. as tensions rose over attacks on foreign-owned shops in South Africa. Footage shows demonstrators hurling rocks and police forces deploying water cannons and tear gas in the streets. The protest took place near a mall where a supermarket of the South African chain ShopRite is located. Nigeria's government stepped up security measures on Wednesday over fears of reprisals against South African businesses in the country. Protesters took to the streets following a series of assaults against shops owned by Nigerians and foreign nationals in South Africa, which resulted in the killing of at least 7 people. Violence in South Africa's Johannesburg and Pretoria erupted for the first time on Sunday, with a number of shops targeted in xenophobic attacks. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa condemned the action, saying that his country is a home for all.
In other news, 1 person was killed and more than 30 were injured when a train collided with a truck at a rail crossing in Yokohama on Thursday morning, leading to the derailment of the first 3 carriages of the train. Take a look. The incident occurred on the KQ line between Kanagawa, Shimachi, and Nakakito stations at around 11:40 local time. According to local media reports, 30 people were injured, with the Japan Times reporting the 67-year-old truck driver dead, while a woman in her 20s remained in critical condition. The KQ line, operated by private railway company KQ Corp, runs through Tokyo and the neighboring Kanagawa Prefecture, carrying passengers to and from Haneda Airport.
U.S. officials on Tuesday declared New York's worst measles epidemic in nearly 30 years officially over after months of emergency measures that included mandatory vaccinations. About 654 people, many in areas with large Orthodox Jewish communities, were infected since October last year, but there have been no new cases since mid-July, the city government said. The official end of the outbreak, 42 days since the last reported case, comes before the start of the U.S. financial capital's new school year Thursday. Schools and nurseries were the focal points of government efforts to stop the spread of the disease. To keep our children and communities safe, I urge all New Yorkers to get vaccinated. It's the best defense we have, Mayor Bill de Blasio said in a statement. Authorities declared measles eliminated in the United States in 2000, but there have been 1,234 cases of the potentially deadly disease reported in the country this year, the worst since 1992, according to the Center for Disease Control. The rise comes as a growing anti-vaccine movement gains steam around the world, driven by fraudulent claims linking the MMR vaccine against measles, mumps, and rubella to a risk of autism in children.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro vowed to deploy a missile system on the Colombian border during a speech in Caracas on Wednesday. Maduro also confirmed the presence of troops in the border regions, responding to a perceived military threat from Colombia. He went on to accuse Colombian President Ivan Duque of having a provocation plan which involved invading Venezuela and then putting on a political show at the UN Security Council.
Con Colombia, como saben ustedes, queremos es paz y hermandad. El presidente Iván Duque, su presidente Iván Duque, tiene un plan de provocación. Falso positivo para el mes de septiembre. Él pretende montar un falso positivo, agredir territorio venezolano para ir al Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas y armar un show político barato a costa de un conflicto armado. Por eso ayer decreté el alerta naranja a todas las tropas de la Fuerza Armada Nacional Bolivariana a lo largo y ancho de la frontera con Colombia para proteger la soberanía de la tierra venezolana, para proteger la paz de Venezuela. Alerta naranja y ya las tropas están desplegadas. Y ahora vamos a desplegar el sistema misilístico. Paz y hermandad.
Earlier, he declared an orange alert against the threat of aggression of Colombia against Venezuela. On Tuesday, 2 days after Communication Minister George Rodriguez presented satellite photos charging Colombia with harboring terrorist training camps. Last week, the U.S. opened a Venezuela Affairs unit in its Colombian embassy, signaling that the effort to depose Maduro with the help of Venezuela's neighbors is not winding down anytime soon, despite the repeated failure of U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido's efforts to seize power.
And the Church of Christ, or Iglesia ni Cristo, continues to help people around the world through its Aid to Humanity project. Here's Julianne Aala.
Misión Evangelica y Ayuda Humanitaria was held in Madrid, Spain, as part of the worldwide Aid to Humanity of the Iglesia ni Cristo for the Church of Christ. The members of the Church of Christ from Madrid, Spain were gathered together with their guests to attend the evangelical mission. After the guests listened attentively to the words of God, the Aid to Humanity was held by the brethren, sharing some relief goods to the guests.
Ang layunin po ng Iglesia, kaya isinasagawa ang ganitong mga aktibidad. Totoo, hindi lang dito sa Espanya, kundi sa iba't ibang panig ng daigdig ginagawa ito ng Iglesia. Una, para makatulong sa ating kapwa, matulungan sila ng mga pangunahing kailangan nila, at higit sa lahat ay maibahagi sa kanila yung mga tunay na aral ng ating Panginoong Diyos. Kasi kung kailangan natin ng mga pangangailangan sa buhay na ito, lalong kailangan nating malaman yung katotohanan na maghahatid sa atin doon sa tunay na buhay o sa kaligtasan.
¿Es la primera vez que asistís a un evento como este?
No, hemos venido varias veces.
¿Y qué os ha parecido el evento de hoy?
Ha sido es muy interesante y gracias a nuestros primos por invitarnos.
Nagpapasalamat po kami dito sa lokal ng Madrid sa ating pinakamamahal na tagapamahalang pangkalahatan, ang kapatid na Eduardo Manalo, sapagkat pinahintulutan nila yung mga ganitong aktibidad. Nakatulong tayo sa ating kapwa, nasunod natin ang utos ng Diyos. At higit sa lahat ay lalong nakita yung pagkakaisa ng Iglesia ni Cristo sa iba't ibang panig po ng mundo.
The Evangelical Mission and the Aid to Humanity is a project inside the Church of Christ to help people all over the world and to propagate the doctrines inside the church. Reporting from Madrid, Spain, I am Juliana Ala and I am 1 with 25.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Watch your favorite Net25 shows on OSN channel 725, same day as the Philippines. Watch your favorite Net25 shows live and on demand anytime, anywhere on any mobile devices on OSN Play.
I am Leo Aquino, EBC correspondent from Vancouver, Canada, and I am standing here in front of the Olympic Cauldron located in the downtown Vancouver. Did you know that the 2010 Winter Olympic was hosted in Vancouver? Make sure to tune in to Digital Nest every Tuesday and Thursday at 7:30 p.m. I am Leo Aquino, and I'm 1 with 25.
The pace of downsizing at American companies surged last month, with more than 10,000 job cuts blamed on trade difficulties alone, according to figures released Thursday. Employers also announced the most layoffs of any August since 2009, the outplacement firm Challenger, Gray Christmas said. Job cuts rose 38% over July, with 53,480 positions to be slashed from employer payrolls, led by workforce reductions in healthcare, which had been a mainstay of recent job creation, the tech sector, and manufacturing. Andrew Challenger, the firm's vice president, said in a statement, and I quote, "We are continuing to see investor concerns shaking confidence in the market, and employers appear to be cutting workers in response to a slowdown in demand for their products and service." Among the reasons cited by employers who let go of workers last month, trade difficulties accounted for 10,488 job cuts, second only to closing with 16,718, while tariffs were blamed for another 646. While U.S. unemployment remains near historic lows and job creation has cooled but remains steady, layoffs have also gathered pace in 2019, according to the Challenger report. The report said August marked the 8th consecutive month this year in which job cuts were higher than in the same month in 2018.
Hong Kong shares ended flat Thursday, a day after a near 4% surge, while mainland Chinese markets rallied on news that China and the United States would resume trade talks next month. The Hang Seng Index inched down 7.7 points to 26,515.53. The benchmark Shanghai Composite Index added 0.96% or 28.45 points to 2,985.86, while the Shenzhen Composite Index, which tracks stocks on China's second exchange, rose to 0.93% or 15.23 points to 1,651.63.
Meanwhile, Cathay Pacific announced Wednesday its chairman John Slosser is stepping down to retire, the latest high-profile executive to leave the troubled airline after it drew Beijing's ire over pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. The flagship carrier has had a torrid few weeks after Chinese state media and authorities excoriated the company because some of its 27,000 employees had taken part in or were sympathetic to anti-government protests currently rocking Hong Kong. In a statement posted on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, Cathay said Slosser, 63, had stepped down and will be replaced as chairman by Patrick Healy, a veteran from the Swire Group conglomerate, the airline's majority shareholder. His resignation is due to his retirement, the statement said, adding that the changes would take effect from November 6 at the conclusion of the company's board meeting. Slosser's departure ends a nearly 4-decade career with Swire and Cathay and caps a tumultuous month of sudden management changes at the airline as it tries to claw its way out of Beijing's bad books. Now in August, CEO Rupert Hogg stepped down alongside another senior executive after China's aviation regulator banned airline staff who had supported the demonstrations from working on flights through its airspace and after state media encouraged a boycott in the crucial mainland market.
The British pound topped $1.23 on Thursday, hitting a one-month peak on fading prospects of a no-deal Brexit after a series of parliamentary votes tore up Prime Minister Boris Johnson's hardline stance. By about 10:20 GMT, sterling had surged to $1.2347, the highest level since July 29, having plunged to multi-years lows Tuesday. Asian and European stock markets mainly rose Thursday, but London was hit by the strong pound that hurts multinationals whose earnings are mostly in foreign currencies. Parliament is currently rushing through legislation designed to keep Johnson from breaking Britain off from the European Union without a trade deal. They appeared on course to do so by Monday, a victory that would be accomplished just ahead of 5-week shutdown of Parliament Johnson controversially ordered last month.
Vietnam Airlines has become the first carrier in the country to secure a coveted license to fly direct to the United States, according to the airline and regulatory filing seen by AFP. The approval has for months been sought by Vietnamese carriers eager to exploit a fast-growing market for air travel among Vietnam's booming middle class. Domestic and regional air travel has mushroomed among Vietnamese travelers, and carriers are hoping the market will extend to U.S. travel too. Vietnam Airlines has been licensed to fly from Hanoi and the southern business hub Ho Chi Minh City to LA, San Francisco, New York, Seattle, Dallas, according to a regulatory filing from the U.S. Department of Transportation obtained by AFP. The carrier will also be able to connect to Vancouver, Montreal, and Toronto in Canada, it said. The terms, which came into effect on August 26, cover air transportation of persons, property, and mail between the Vietnamese and North American cities. It was not immediately clear if the flights would be non-stop or would transit through Taipei, Osaka, and Nagoya, which were listed as approved intermediate hubs in the filing.
Tech giant Samsung has said it will launch its hotly anticipated first foldable smartphone on Friday, months after faulty screens forced an embarrassing delay of its release. The world's largest smartphone maker spent nearly 8 years developing the Galaxy Fold, but had to hold its launch in April after reviewers reported screen problems within days of use. It was a major setback for the firm, which was hoping to spark demand for its high-end phones with the launch of the $2,000 device, with profits plunging in recent quarters in the face of a weakened market and strong competition from Chinese rivals. After months of refining the Galaxy Fold, which is ready for use on high-end 5G networks in some markets, Samsung said it will release a smartphone in South Korea on Friday, followed by select countries, including the United States, Germany, and France. The firm will also offer to program to Galaxy Fold users, under which the company would cover 70% of the cost of screen repair once within a year of use. Samsung Electronics shares closed up 3.6% in Seoul. The Galaxy Fold has been widely promoted as the world's first foldable smartphone, while rivals such as China's Huawei have been racing to bring similar devices to market. Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr. Also check out our boards and Pinterest and pictures on Instagram. I'm Sam Sept. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Alma Angeles. Donna Rosco is with us. Don, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm sure you'll be joining us again for the coming days.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Don.
You are very welcome.
All right, and that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and
And we are one with 25.